Thank you so much for joining us here at Kenya Decide at Mwanzo TV. My name is Victor Wanaswa. Remember, we continue to bring you coverage concerning the 2022 Kenyan elections. On Thursday, we saw members of parliament of the 13th parliament being swearing in before they started their first sitting, with the first agenda on the table being electing the speakers and their deputies, both in the national and the Senate. And in studio, we are privileged to host Mr. Walter Trenk, a lawyer here in Kenya, who will be helping us unpack some of the issues surrounding these elections and pertaining to the 13th Parliament in Kenya. Thank you so much, Wakili, for coming.
Thank you for having me, Victor.
Now, let's start with the first sitting of both the National and the Senate, which was on Thursday. We saw both candidates who are being fronted by the Kenya Kwanza side emerging the winners in that race. Yes. First, as a lawyer, what's your take on that process?
Yeah, my take is that under the Constitution and also under the provisions of the standing orders of both houses of Parliament, yeah. It was the first thing to be done after the convening of the Parliament, yeah, by the President. It doesn't matter whether the President is the one who has been elected, yes, or the one who is outgoing, but it has to be done within 30 days after the elections. Mm. So that means we had to have that sitting at least by latest today. And therefore, I was not surprised to see what happened in terms of the convening of the Parliament by the President. He gazetted the sitting for both houses, the Senate and the National Assembly, and the two houses met. And of course, the first business was they had only three items, yes, on the order papers, both houses. That is the swearing in of the members of Parliament. Yes. And members of Parliament means both houses. Yeah. And the second one was the election of the Speaker. The third item, I think, was order on the paper was the election of the Deputy Speaker. And that's as it should be, and that was the end of the business for the day. Basically, in my view, I was not surprised about what happened because the Kenya Kwanza coalition, which has formed this government, or is going to form this government. At one point, we thought it was going to be a hung parliament, whereby we are not going to have an absolute majority. Mm. But from the look of things, from the last couple of days, what is emerging is that the President-elect, Dr. William Ruto, has marshaled his troops, and people are still trooping to his side because no one likes to sit on a side which is seeming to be losing. And also, nobody wants to be in an opposition which doesn't seem to have very clear leadership. President Uhuru Kenyatta is going in retirement, even if he still insists that he's going to be he is actually the Azimio chairman, but being Azimio chairman, but with what prospects? Because people want to look at the prospects of the leader. And the prospects he has are very, very, very remote in terms of politics, because he cannot come again and run for president. Yes. Of course, the Constitution doesn't say he cannot run, but it provides that you cannot be president for more than 2 consecutive terms. I don't know whether he's planning to come back after this one term, because it will then put an interregnum between his 2 terms and come back again. I don't know. It's something we have to wait and see. And on the part of the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, from the way he has conducted himself in the last couple of days also, he has not come out very strongly to indicate what is going to be his political future. And because of that bleak look of the issues on that part of the political divide, that's why you are seeing people trooping towards Kenya Kwanza in droves. And you should expect this to happen for the next couple of months, actually.
And then Moses Masika Wetangula, Amason Jeffa Kingi, yeah, Gladys Boss Shulei, both The candidates that were fronted by Kenya Kwanza
Yes.
are the ones that were elected for the speakers and their deputies in both houses.
Yes.
Were you surprised with that?
Well, I wasn't surprised because, as I said earlier, from the activities which had happened earlier before the convening of Parliament, it looked quite pretty obvious that Kenya Kwanza was mobilizing their troops and they were going to get what they wanted in both houses, and they got it yesterday. What actually I wasn't surprised, the only thing that I think surprised me is that Azimio gave up too early and they didn't look very coordinated in terms of leadership. There doesn't seem to be a clear leader of the team, both in the Senate and in the National Assembly. I saw a bit of attempts from Azimio to try and filibuster, I mean to stall the process, which looked very obvious that what happened actually was still going to happen anyway, and they gave up early. So I wasn't surprised at all about the events of yesterday in terms of who got what, because they were predetermined positions, like the position of Honorable Moses Wetangula is a position I think which had been negotiated within the Kenya Kwanza coalition right from the beginning. And I write even from the days of the campaigns, they kept on talking about the positions they had shared. And I think it was simply a fulfillment of the promises that had been made during the campaign period. So I wasn't surprised at all.
John Badi, the ODM chair, says that Azimio has the majority representation in both houses. Whereas we saw by the virtue of Kenya Kwanza candidates emerging victors in that process.
Yes.
It means they have the numbers. So as a lawyer, which side do you think has the majority representation in both houses?
On paper, of course, Azimio has the majority in the National Assembly, but in the Senate, I think Kenya Kwanza has a majority by, I think, just one. On paper, as I said. But Kenyan politics being what it is, normally we don't have a lot of, we are not very neat in the way we conduct our politics, so that you will find people in different coalitions on paper, but in their conduct and the way they carry out their business, both inside Parliament and outside Parliament, is completely the opposite of what it's supposed to be. For example, I think the numbers that Azimio has are, I've not checked really about the exact numbers, but what I know is that they have the majority in the National Assembly. And that means that the people who have crossed to Kenya Kwanza and they have standing MOUs, agreements, which they signed before the elections, and deposited with the registrar of political parties. It means that they have to run their course, which is about, according to the provisions of the law, it means that they have to actually formally join Kenya Kwanza after at least 2 months, an expiry of 2 months period after the general elections. That means these coalitions will come into effect, the ones they are signing will come into effect sometime in November, around 10th onwards, because it's 2 months. They are given 60 periods on either side of the election to change to sign new coalition agreements and so on. So what exists right now on paper is that these members of Parliament who are currently professing to be members of Kenya Kwanza, like for example Chama Chap, I think, and even the power one for Amazon Kingi, for example, is technically an Azimio affiliate party. But of course, as we have said, practically we are seeing the practical conduct of the members is that they are already in Kenya Kwanza.
And then Kalonzo Musyoka pulled out of at the tail end of the race to clinch the speakership of the Senate,
yes.
Citing bribery, coercion, and other malpractices. Do you think those allegations by Kalonzo Musyoka has any?
No. I don't think so. As you know, Kalonzo, many Kenyans know him as a politician who keeps on changing positions, and he lived his. I mean, by his conduct yesterday. Was it yesterday? Yes. By his conduct yesterday, he was actually living to his true form and character of Kalonzo Musyoka. Because it's expected, when you get surprised, you only get surprised by Kalonzo when he becomes firm on a position. But he keeps on changing. And this was not a surprise to me. It also looked to me like they had not done sufficient lobbying because Azimio did not seem to have lobbied enough their members and then decided on which positions they were going for. Looking at the numbers, both in the Senate and in the National Assembly, yes, I realized that Kalonzo's Wiper has, I think, less than 15 members of parliament or thereabout. And that therefore means then he would only have gotten the Wiper members. And that means only coming from the region of Ukambani. Machakos, I think he would have gotten, and Makueni and I think Kitui. I don't think he was counting on any other vote beyond that. And then I think that's why his members, because there was a statement issued by the party that the members had prevailed upon him not to run for that position to avoid embarrassment and humiliation. That's one. But two, which to me is more important, is that in Azimio, according to the pecking order, is that I thought Kalonzo Musyoka would have been the heir apparent to the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. Why? Because Mother Karua doesn't seem to have a constituency, because the constituency she purportedly was bringing on the table actually didn't come with her. And therefore the next person in command of Azimio to lead the troops, both outside, specifically, particularly outside, because he's not a member of parliament, was Kalonzo Musyoka. Now, my surprise was that the guy actually came and he wanted to be speaker. To me, when someone says they want to be speaker, it means they want to become politically neutral, because as a speaker, you cannot play partisan politics. And therefore, effectively, it removes you from the political arena and circulation for the 5 years, for the next 5 years. And therefore, that means you don't have any active political ambitions that you can pursue, and, in my view.
And in your opinion,
yes,
what next for Kalonzo Musyoka?
What next for Kalonzo Musyoka is that just before I walked into this studio, I saw him having a meeting with the President-elect, Dr. William Ruto. And then to me, that means that Kalonzo is just looking for a position, a place where he can have some sanctuary. He's looking for sanctuary because politically it means that he has accepted that he cannot pursue his political ambitions. Why is very simple for you to look at the perspective of, to look at the whole perspective of the next 5 years. That means if, for example, he moves into Kenya Kwanza, which looks like that's where he's headed to, it then means that he cannot try to build his political machine, for example, to put up a campaign to challenge in the next election, to challenge William Ruto in that election. And therefore that means that he has effectively removed himself from the political arena. He probably wants just to get some appointment by the president, whether he wants to go into the diplomatic service or he wants to serve in the cabinet is something that remains to be seen. But in terms of politics, I think the guy is probably negotiating himself out of the contest, the next contest. That's if it comes to fruition that he will have joined Kenya Kwanza. If he does not, then he has a future whereby he can put a claim to be the next president after William Ruto, probably in 2027 or 2032, by putting up a challenge. If he does not, he's effectively out of politics because of his age also. He's in the late 60s, and if he goes into late 60s and becomes a spanner boy, for lack of a better word to use, then that means he cannot challenge William Ruto for obvious reasons. You cannot challenge a person who has given you a job. including all the other guys who are in Kenya Kwanza, whether you're talking of Moses Wetangula, you're talking of Musalia Mudavadi, they are not on the cards in terms of the 2027 elections.
Now let's talk about the government and the opposition. But first, what are some of the effects of a government having a majority in both houses?
In most democracies, whether you're talking about the Commonwealth or even outside the Commonwealth, in most democracies, governments which form government are always the majority anyway. Why they are forming government is because they are majority, by the way. Because they were voted overwhelmingly by the populace. And therefore that means the Kenyan situation is not unique. But what it means then is that, and I do want to agree with the president-elect about having a need for an opposition. An opposition is important in a country because then it keeps the government on its toes. Yeah. And so the few people who may remain on the Azimio side, we really need them to be there, not so that they can continue being mocked and being made fun of for having lost an election. It's normal to lose an election. But then you organize yourselves and then come back and capture government. Because for political parties all over the world, their main business is to capture power. So the existence of, for example, Azimio is not necessarily to make the same mistake like the one they made in 2017, where they joined government and then they actually blurred the lines between the opposition and government. So that at the end of the day, we actually did not know where the lines for the opposition started and where they ended and where government started and where it ended. We need a situation where we have an opposition which keeps the government on its toes, make sure that they're criticizing all the steps the government takes and providing the alternative view to Kenyans. Where the government, for example, comes and talks about bottoms up, we have another alternative voice talking about this is what we would do if you gave us a chance to govern. That way, we'll check on the runaway corruption, which has been a big problem in our country. We'll check on governance issues. We'll check on issues to do with the democracy. We'll check on the issues of the rule of law, and all those issues require an opposition to be there, an organized opposition with serious leadership that challenges the government all the way, along the way as they move.
Now, we've been seeing members of Azimio crossing the line, joining Kenya Kwanza, or rather promising to work with the president-elect. Do you think Azimio will be able to play the role of the opposition effectively? Yeah,
that is why, as I said, Victor, it is worrying to me that I see leaders from within the minority party, which of course in terms of winning seats they probably have more, but in parliament because of governance they are the minority because they are not forming government. It worries me when I see them falling over themselves to join Kenya Kwanza, because that means then that we are not going to have an effective opposition, and a government without an effective opposition is very dangerous. It can get away with murder. They can pass laws which are not favorable to the people or not necessarily for the good of the country. So we need an opposition, and I think we need to call upon the members of the side which has not formed government, which is Azimio, to hold their positions and hold this government to account. Whether some of us are going to be in that government, like me personally, or not, whether I support it or not, I think we need an opposition to keep the government in check. But I'm not seeing the signs. The signs are not very promising from the Azimio side, because almost every other guy who has expressed themselves so far have made it look like they won't mind joining the government side, and that's not the way we should go.
And then, as a lawyer, as someone who has been in this political space for some time,
yes,
not maybe not actively, but how are we going to improve the quality of debates that we've been witnessing in Parliament?
The quality of debates, as the maxim goes, people deserve what they get. And that means the electorate are the ones who elect those honorable members who get into Parliament. And when the quality of debate is low or high, it depends on the caliber of the people whom we have elected to parliament. So certain parliaments in the history of Kenya, for example, certain parliaments have been more vibrant than others. We had more vibrant parliaments right in the 70s. I think in the late 70s we had better parliaments where we had people like J.M. Kariuki, people like Elijah Mwangale, the Koigwa Mweres and that group, and Mwachofi, and I think Ichibule Wasuma. That group had a very vibrant kind of debaters in parliament. We had a good number of people who also came up sometime, I think, the 80s period, the decade between 1980 and 1990 didn't have a very good crop of parliamentarians because of the dictatorial leadership that we had from the late President Daniel Moi. Why? And why that I'm saying that it is important that we have a good level of debating skills from our members of parliament, from the electorate, because the electorate need people who are going to debate and put forward their issues and their interests that represent them and also the country. So the level of debate we expect in this parliament to be at a level that is acceptable, that is of standards that are that we as a country can be proud of, that we have a parliament that discusses the issues that face the citizenry, and that they are going to be focused on how to move the country forward instead of getting involved in those petty debates and about fighting the useless wars between the coalitions and the political divide, which does not help the people of Kenya more. What should help the people of Kenya is about the welfare of the country, the projects the government, the policies the government will put on the table, and critiquing them, of course, in a constructive way, so that we can have a country that looks like we are living in the 21st century.
And Kenya Kwanza and the President-elect William Ruto had indicated that they will be amending the standing orders in Parliament so that cabinet secretaries will be invited in the National Assembly to come and answer questions from members of Parliament.
Yes.
Will that move? Will it bring accountability among the cabinet?
Yeah. I think that would be a good thing because, when we adopted our system of governance, where we separated the powers between the organs of government, that's between the branches of government, where we put the legislature on its own, completely detached from government, from the executive. We have the executive, and then also we have the judiciary. I think that was a good thing, but we not really forgot, maybe probably it's because we had not tried it out, the model that we came up with, the model of governance, where we have parliament not having representatives from the executive. And so we need to break that link. And I think that's a very wonderful proposal. If it was brought into the House, I think Kenyans should support it. The members of parliament, I think, should support it so that the ministers or the CSs, the cabinet secretaries who are appointed by the president, should come to parliament and respond to questions from members of parliament like it used to before. But then we also have to maintain whatever legislation that we come up with, we must maintain that separation so that there's no interconnectedness between the two branches of parliament where they end up looking like they are going into bed together. The incestuous relationship between the government, between the executive and parliament.
Let's talk about CDF. Supreme Court had mentioned about CDF being illegal.
Yes.
But members of parliament still maintains that CDF is still there.
Yeah, what the Supreme Court pronounced itself on the matter of CDF is that the CDF Act is unconstitutional. And that therefore means that when an act is unconstitutional, what it means is that it is not in sync. It does not conform to the constitutional provisions of the separation of powers and the conflict of interest, for example, where we have members of parliament sitting as I think they call them patrons or something. They use some of before then, there was a bit of amendment of that act. Before that, the members of parliament used to actually sit on the CDF committees in their constituencies. But then they amended that act where now we have a situation where the members of parliament don't sit on the committees, but they still have maintained some relationship with the CDF by, for example, being referred to as patrons within the constituencies. Now that means the member of parliament does not necessarily sit on the committees, but their cronies do. And therefore, what they need to do, like what the members of parliament are still maintaining, because we all agree, I'm sure you will also agree with me, Victor, that CDF is good for our country, that it has done very, very good things within our constituencies, within the countryside. There are places where, in this country, by the way, there are places where you could have gone and you don't find a single school with stones, with stone buildings. Right now, when you go to the countryside, you find storied buildings in schools, and that's good. So what we need then to do is to make sure that we come up with an act, whether we are going to do amendment or do a whole repeal of the act and come up with a new act, but still to come up with a formulation of a system, of a structure that is still going to do development within the constituencies. And I think that's where the members of parliament are coming from. Whether they're still going to be part of the whole arrangement as members of parliament, or whether we are going to have, for example, a system where, for example, we can have elections again at the constituency level, where we're going to elect the committees directly by the people within the constituencies. Whatever it is that we come up with, that type of formulation is going to be important. The most important thing is to maintain that kind of arrangement at the constituency level. Whatever we call it, or whatever kind of infrastructure we put there, is upon the members of parliament to do it, and I think they will do it.
Mm.
Yeah.
And then my last question is about your take, or what do you think is going to be the next move for Raila Amolo Odinga after losing for the fifth time?
Yeah. Well, I think looking at Raila Odinga and his contribution, the contribution that he has made to this country's democratic space, to the expansion of our democratic space, he has made quite a bit of contribution as an individual. And therefore, I think for him and all his supporters, all is not lost in terms of, because sometimes we have had people who have fought for their countries, and when you look at history, it is replete with people who have made huge contributions in their countries, but they never became president. When I look at, for example, people like Mahatma Gandhi never became president of India, but the contribution he made towards the push for India's independence was so huge that even when you mention the name Gandhi, people think he actually became president. He never became president. And I also look at, for example, the case of Nigeria. Their biggest and the towering giant of the independence push was Sir Nnamdi Azikiwe. Nnamdi Azikiwe never became president of Nigeria, but the contribution again he made for Nigeria's democratic space and independence and so on was huge. Raila's contribution to our country's independence, not independence really, but to the democratic space and the expansion, and many other things that he has done, including having become a prime minister. We have millions of Kenyans who never have that type of a privilege. So at his age, probably, I think what I would say, of course it's unsolicited advice, is for him to go into retirement. He can still give counsel to young politicians who are also aspiring to become leaders in our country, and also give his opinions from wherever he will be. I don't think it's all lost. But in terms of his future, whether he can come back and again run in 2027, again, I think he still has a right as a Kenyan. He can still come back and throw his heart into the ring. But the right thing for him to do, from where I sit, would be for him to go into retirement and nudge young politicians to take over the mantle of leadership in this country.
Thank you so much.
Then you have not asked me about the issues about around the by-elections which are coming up. Mm-hmm. Maybe I could say one or two things about because the IBC, the IBC has conducted an election. Of course, there were people who are not happy about the results.
Yeah.
And we have now a new parliament. We have new leaders who are going to lead Kenya into the next 5 years, including the president. We also have elections coming up in Bungoma, because I'm sure there will be a by-election in Bungoma.
Yeah.
Now that Moses Wetangula, who is now the Speaker of the National Assembly, was the elected senator for Bungoma.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a very interesting space to watch in the coming couple of months. When they issue the Speaker, I'm sure they will issue the writs for the vacancies within those positions. And I think it's going to be a battle between, again, we are going to have another test that will give us, because then that's when the leadership within the opposition, within Azimio, will emerge in that election. We'll see who is going to lead the troops. And then that is going to give us the hope of whether we are going to have a government without a serious opposition, or whether the opposition is going to have to be there. My advice is to Azimio is to field a candidate there. I'm sure UDA will also field a candidate, because Bungoma is basically the membership in Bungoma is UDA. UDA has more members, but they don't have leaders at the top, at the count level. And then, of course, Fort Kenya will. So let's wait and see as the time goes, as the time rolls down, to see whether we are going to have an opposition within that election, and then it will give us a clearer picture of what to expect in the next 5 years.
Thank you so much, Walter Trenk, for coming, and also for sharing your insights pertaining to the Kenyan politics.
Thank you. Thank you for having me too, Victor. Yeah. And I'm very happy and grateful for having me on your show and being also here for the first time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that was Walter Trenk, a lawyer here in Kenya, just sharing with us insights pertaining to the Kenyan politics. And that's where we wrap it up for today. We'll meet next time. My name is Victor Wanasu.